July 26, 1944, 3 miles south of Saint-Lô, Normandy, France. The air was thick with the acrid scent of diesel and damp earth, the kind that clung to your lungs and reminded you war was a dirty business. Staff Sergeant Frank Novak leaned against the cold steel hull of his M4A1 Sherman tank, Lucky Strike, its name stenciled in bold white letters across the 75mm gun barrel. The name was a grim joke from his loader, Tommy Russo, about their odds of surviving another day in Normandy. Frank didn't feel lucky. He felt bone-tired, the kind of exhaustion that settled into your marrow after 3 weeks of dodging bullets and praying the next hedgerow wouldn't hide a panzer. In his hand was a crumpled letter to his wife, Rose, back in Detroit. He'd been trying to write it for 20 minutes, scratching out lines that felt too honest or not honest enough. How do you tell the woman you love that the worst part of war isn't the fighting, but the waiting? The endless hours wondering if the next mission would be your last. They'd knocked out a Panzer IV last week, taken down a couple of German half-tracks before that. The Sherman had done its job, reliable, fast enough, good enough. But good enough wasn't enough when you were up against a tiger. Frank glanced at the briefing paper tucked into his jacket pocket, its words seared into his mind like a death warrant. A German Tiger I, call sign Iron Ghost, was prowling the hedgerows near Hill 192. Commanded by Oberleutnant Karl Brandt, a veteran with 47 confirmed kills since Tunisia, this single tank had obliterated 11 Allied vehicles in 48 hours, including 3 Shermans. The math was brutal. A Tiger's 88mm gun could punch through a Sherman's armor at 2,000 yards, while Frank's 75mm needed to close to 300 yards to even dent the Tiger's 100mm frontal armor. 3 football fields of open ground, under fire, with no guarantee of success. American doctrine preached advancing in line, concentrating fire, following the book. But Frank had built these Shermans on the factory floor in Detroit. He knew their limits, their strengths, and as he sketched angles in his notebook under the dim glow of a flashlight, he saw something the manual writers hadn't. Not a better gun, not thicker armor, but a geometry problem, one that could turn the Tiger's greatest strength into its fatal flaw. July 24, 1944, 0600 hours. The assembly area 3 miles south of Saint-Lô was a churned-up mess of mud and tire tracks. The morning air was cool, Frank's breath forming faint clouds as he stood beside Lucky Strike. His crew moved through their morning rituals with the mechanical precision of men who'd done this too many times. Jamie Walsh, the gunner, was cleaning the breech of the 75mm with a rag, humming a hymn under his breath, something he did when nerves got the better of him. Jamie was a farm boy from Iowa, all of 19, with a Bible always tucked under his arm. "Sarge, you think we'll see action today?" he asked, not looking up. Frank folded Rose's letter and slipped it into his breast pocket, next to the last one she'd sent, her neat handwriting promising meatloaf when he got home. "Eitel says the Germans are falling back. Might be a quiet day," he replied, knowing it was a lie. The silence on the radio, the way Captain Morrison had been pacing the command tent since dawn, it all screamed trouble. Something was coming. At 0700, Battalion S2 called the tank commanders to a briefing. Frank trudged across the muddy field with other 11 sergeants and lieutenants, their faces grim under the weight of unspoken fears. Inside the tent, Captain Morrison stood beside a map board, his eyes sunken from sleepless nights. He'd fought in North Africa, seen what German armor could do when it held the high ground. His voice was flat, like a man delivering a eulogy. "Gentlemen, we have confirmation of a Tiger I operating near Hill 192. Call sign Iron Ghost. Intelligence indicates it's commanded by Oberleutnant Karl Brandt. In 48 hours, this tank has destroyed 11 Allied vehicles, 3 of them Shermans. The math was brutal. A Tiger's 88mm gun could punch through a Sherman's armor at 2,000 yards, while Frank's 75mm needed to close to 300 yards to even dent the Tiger's 100mm frontal armor. 3 football fields of open ground, under fire, with no guarantee of success. American doctrine preached advancing in line, concentrating fire, following the book. But Frank had built these Shermans on the factory floor in Detroit. He knew their limits, their strengths. And as he sketched angles in his notebook under the dim glow of a flashlight, he saw something the manual writers hadn't. Not a better gun, not thicker armor, but a geometry problem, one that could turn the Tiger's greatest strength into its fatal flaw. July 25, 1944, 08:15 hours. The American column advanced through the bocage, 5 Shermans in perfect formation, 50 yards apart, as doctrine demanded. Lucky Strike held second position, call sign Rawhide 2. The hedgerows loomed like green walls, 8 feet tall, thick enough to stop a truck. Visibility was 50 yards at best, a claustrophobic maze where death could hide behind any corner. Inside the tank, the air was heavy with oil, sweat, and the metallic tang of ammunition. The M4A1 carried 89 rounds for the 75mm, stacked in racks around the turret. Frank sat in the commander's position, his eyes scanning the vision ports, his headset crackling with radio chatter.
At 08:22, the lead tank, Rawhide 1, rounded a hedgerow corner. The sound came first, a sharp crack, like a whip snapped by a giant. Not artillery, but the unmistakable report of an 88mm round traveling at 2,657 feet per second. Rawhide 1 erupted in flames, its front plate torn open like tinfoil. Ammunition cooked off inside, sending a fireball 30 feet into the air. Frank's throat went dry. "Halt! Reverse!" he shouted. But Rawhide 3 was already pushing forward, its commander following doctrine, trying to spot the enemy. Another crack. Rawhide 3's turret was blown clean off, the explosion echoing through the bocage. 3 crewmen died instantly. 2 bailed out, their uniforms ablaze, screaming as they rolled in the mud. Frank pounded his fist on the driver's shoulder. Lucky Strike lurched into reverse, retreating into a sunken lane. Through the vision port, he saw only smoke, hedgerows, and the burning husks of 2 Shermans. Jamie's voice trembled. "Sarge, I can't see it. Where is it?" "I don't know," Frank admitted, his hands shaking on the radio. They couldn't see the Tiger, couldn't hit what they couldn't see, and running would expose their thinner side armor. 800 meters away, Oberleutnant Carl Brandt watched through the crystal-clear Zeiss optics of his Tiger's commander's cupola. The tank was hull down behind a thick hedgerow, its turret barely visible, with clear sight lines down 3 approach lanes. German precision turned the Americans into targets in a shooting gallery. "Target, Panzer, 1,600 meters, Carl said calmly. His gunner, Hans, adjusted for range and windage. The 88mm KWK-36L-56 was a masterpiece. 3,000 feet per second muzzle velocity, flat trajectory, devastating penetration. Time to target, 1.8 seconds. The Americans never saw it coming. Carl pressed the firing button. The tracer arced across the distance, and another Sherman brewed up. "Clean kill," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. His loader, Schmidt, was already slamming another round into the breech. "Herr Oberleutnant," Schmidt said, young and eager, "is it true 1 Tiger equals 10 Shermans?" Carl watched the 3rd burning Sherman through his optics. 3 crews, 15 men, gone in 4 minutes. He said, "Propaganda says we're invincible. The truth is simpler. German engineering plus good ground equals advantage, but advantages run out. He tapped the fuel gauge, less than half a tank left. Supply lines were crumbling, and the Americans kept coming. July 26th, 0200 hours. Frank couldn't sleep. In his tent, he sat with a notebook, sketching by flashlight. Doctrine demanded a frontal assault, but that was suicide. The Tiger was a fortress when stationary, its frontal armor impenetrable. But Shermans were fast, 30 miles per hour on roads, and the Tiger's turret traverse was slow, 60 seconds for a full rotation without power. What if 3 Shermans attacked from different angles, simultaneously? The Tiger couldn't face them all at once. It was a geometry problem, like optimizing a factory line. Change the math, change the outcome. At 300 hours, he marched to Battalion HQ. Captain Morrison was awake, surrounded by casualty reports, his face haggard under the oil lamp's glow. "Sergeant Novak, it's 3 in the morning," Morrison said, exasperated. "I know, sir, but I can kill that Tiger." Frank spread his sketches on the desk, approach routes, timing marks, radio sequences. Doctrine demands a frontal assault, but that was suicide. We hit from 3 directions within 60 seconds. He can't rotate fast enough. Morrison studied the sketches, his jaw tight. "That's not doctrine, Sergeant. You break formation, you risk crossfire or getting lost in the bocage." Frank pushed forward more diagrams. "Sir, I built these tanks in Detroit. I know what they can do. We're faster than that 56-ton beast. If we're wrong, we're no worse off than now, advancing in line and dying." Morrison rubbed his eyes, weighing the lives of 9 men against the chance to rewrite the odds. One chance. Rawhides 2, 4, and 5. Synchronized attack. 0600. If you're wrong, those men are on you. Dawn, July 26th. Frank briefed Lieutenant David Chen and Staff Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez in their tents. Chen, a meticulous engineer from San Francisco, traced the routes on Frank's sketches. "Timing has to be perfect," he said. "If one of us is early, the Tiger picks us off." Rodriguez folded a letter to his daughters. "You're right, Frank. Driving straight at an 88mm isn't a plan. It's a death wish." They named it the Texas Two-Step. Rodriguez would pin frontally, with smoke at 1,200 yards. Frank and Chen would flank from parallel routes, hitting the Tiger's weaker side armor. They synchronized watches, set radio time hacks, and planned fallback positions. Jamie sketched the plan in his Bible's margin. 3 Shermans circling 1 Tiger, a David and Goliath geometry. 600 hours. 3 Shermans roared through the bocage, converging on the Tiger's position like a closing triangle. Lucky Strike bounced over rutted lanes at 28 miles per hour, faster than doctrine allowed. Frank gripped the turret rail, his heart pounding. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio. "Rawhide 5 laying smoke now." White phosphorus bloomed across the Tiger's position, blinding its optics. At 6:02, the Tiger fired blindly through the smoke, missing Rawhide 5 by 15 feet. Carl Brandt's voice was sharp inside the Tiger. "They're flanking. Pivot right." But the 56-ton tank bogged down in the soft Norman soil, its turret sluggishly turning. At 6:04, Lucky Strike burst through a hedgerow gap at 600 yards, a perfect side angle on the Tiger. "Target, Panzer, side, 600, Jamie shouted. The 75mm fired, the round striking the Tiger's ammunition storage. Sparks flew, but the 80mm side armor held. "Reload," Frank yelled, as the Tiger's 88mm swung towards them. Then, a second crack from the opposite flank. Chen's Rawhide 4 hit the turret ring at 500 yards, jamming the gun. Rodriguez pushed through the smoke at 400 yards, pouring rounds into the rear armor. In 15 seconds, 9 rounds overwhelmed the Tiger. An engine hit sparked flames, and the German crew bailed out, hands raised. Carl Brandt stood beside his burning tank, calm, An engineer witnessing a problem solved. Frank's crew secured the prisoners, but the radio crackled with Morrison's voice. Tiger contact at grid Quebec 7-4. Rawhide 6 and Rawhide 7 destroyed. Rawhide 2, you're closest. 7:15 hours. Frank made a snap decision. He approached Carl, sidearm drawn but lowered. In broken German, he asked, More tigers? How many? Carl answered in accented English, 2, maybe 3. You cannot face them alone. You're coming with us, Frank said. Tell us how to kill them. Jamie protested, but Frank cut him off. American crews are dying. If he knows tiger weaknesses, we use him. Carl extended his wrists for zip ties. I'll help, not to betray Germany, but because bad doctrine, American or German, is murder. They raced toward grid Quebec 7-4, Carl in the commander's seat, Jamie's sidearm on him. He studied Frank's map, pointing to high ground. The Tiger will be hulled down, 3 approach lanes, side armor, 80 millimeters, penetrable at 800 yards. Turret traverse is slow, 30 seconds with power. At the engagement zone, Rawhide 6 was a wreck, Rawhide 7 limping away. Frank radioed, Rawhide 6, execute Texas two-step. Smoke bloomed, and the attack unfolded as before. Frank pinned frontally, Chen and Rawhide 7 flanked. The second Tiger fell in minutes, its crew surrendering. A British Firefly rolled up, its 17-pounder gun gleaming. Lieutenant Powell grinned. Next week, you won't need fancy footwork. This can kill a tiger at 1,000 yards. Carl nodded. Good ideas become doctrine. That's how wars are won. As MPs led Carl away, Frank shook his hand. 2 engineers, bound by a shared language of problem solving. 3 months later, the Texas two-step was official doctrine. Firefly production surged, and tigers became targets. In November, Frank learned Carl was in a POW camp, teaching Allied interrogators tank design and sketching bridges, not weapons. Frank wrote to Rose that night, Wars aren't won by machines, but by thinking. Sometimes, even enemies teach you how to win.